Good morning, everyone. It's Carol Laurie, and I'm here with a dear friend and colleague, Anne-Laure, who is a yoga therapist who specializes in helping women and men recover their emotional wellness from trauma. And she's going to talk more about this and explain her work and how you can get in touch with her. So welcome, Anne-Laure. Thank you so much for being here.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
So share a little bit about how you originally got into this yoga business, so to speak.
Yeah, so I started my professional career as an electrical engineer, actually. So that was the
That's a big
first.
transformation.
It sure is. So that was the first 7 years, really, of my adult life after college. And so that's when I discovered yoga in the last couple of years in that career. So I started practicing yoga for myself, and really felt like a shift in how it was supporting me and helping me, both with my physical health, but also mental health and emotional health. And so I decided to become a yoga teacher. When I first did my yoga teacher training, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to teach full time or not. But I guess the more I did it and the more I shared, I guess, those practices with others, the more that's really what my passion, I guess, became. And so in my early years as a yoga teacher, I also started to learn more about how yoga can be helpful for mental health, specifically, among other things. And so that's when I decided to specialize and become a yoga therapist. So that took a few more years of training. So I ended up specializing in trauma recovery, mental health, emotional health, as I was doing my training. And so that's what I've been doing for the last 7-8 years now.
And how do you specialize in trauma recovery and emotional health when you're doing yoga? Is there a special teacher? Is there special positions? What constitutes that specific yoga form?
Yeah, so I trained as a trauma sensitive yoga facilitator. So that means it really changed the way that I was teaching all of my classes, really. So the way that trauma sensitive yoga works is, in the language that I'm using when I'm teaching classes, offering different choices, encouraging people to get in touch with, how something feels for them rather than following a specific, form or shape in your body. And I guess it also brings in this aspect of empowering each of us to relate to our body in a different way, in a way that feels more empowering, to be more present to ourselves. So that's part of it. I also, I guess, took a lot of different trainings around mental health specifically, so that I, knew more about that and how I could incorporate it into my yoga teaching. So, I would say taking specialized trainings from teachers who've been doing that for a long time, learning from them, learning what specifically can be helpful in yoga with our mental health. I think there's a lot of different ways that yoga can be taught. And when we are offering for mental health specifically, I think there's a lot of things that we have to be more intentional about or more mindful of in terms of how we present it and offer it to people.
How do you think trauma impacts my community as women with breast cancer? So let's just focus on women. How do you think trauma impacts women when they go to yoga?
Yeah, so, I think often when we walk into let's, talk about a more typical yoga class, going to a studio, there's a lot of uncertainty, unknown, especially if it's the first time that you're going to a yoga class. And a lot of the way that yoga classes are taught is more directive. And so it's do this, do that, put your body in this specific shape, breathe in that way, open your eyes, close your eyes. And all of these little choices that are taken away from us can be similar, or I guess I guess at least not helpful in terms of recovering from a traumatic experience. So a lot of what, goes into an experience of trauma is that power or choice being taken away from us. And so the way that trauma sensitive yoga, tries to restore that is instead of like offering choices, realizing that, we have those choices still available to us in terms of like how we want to move our body, how we want to breathe today, if we want to keep our eyes open or closed. And so some of those things that might happen in like a more regular, I guess, yoga class, for some people may be harmful, for some people may just not be helpful at all. So this is where maybe like some of the difference might be. Is that answering your question?
Yes, 100%.
Yeah.
And when right now, I assume you're working through Zoom.
A lot of it, yeah.
So it must be really easy for women to connect with you through Zoom, and they're teaching and they do the positions. I personally love yoga and think that even after just sitting and breathing differently, your whole energy and your nervous system begins to change. And when you go through the positions, by the time you're done, you're just in a very different place energetically, and if you do that every day, then it builds up. So
it does, yes. Yeah.
And how long do you think it takes? Because I'm not very flexible and I don't care. I mean, I go and I do the best I can. And I think that's important. I have these blocks that help me. I mean, I'm not, and I think women need to understand that when you first start doing yoga, no matter what you can do, it's better than nothing.
Yes, absolutely.
So can you talk a little bit about that, the expectations women have of when they start out and what the reality is going to be?
Yeah, so that's an interesting question. I mean, of course, it depends, right? It depends on what kind of movement activities you've done in the past, how, I guess, familiar and aware of your body you feel. But I think walking into any activity that is new or unfamiliar, there's definitely a little bit of time there to for us to get used to those different positions, those different ways of breathing, and I think, of course, like practice and repetition is going to be helpful. What I often recommend when I work one-on-one with people is, to start with a practice that feels accessible to you. So whatever that means for you. And for some people, it might be, just a seated practice. For some people, it might be smaller movement, depending on like what feels helpful for your body right now. And of course, like when we're talking about like recovering from cancer, like your body might also have, different limitations and different abilities that, feel accessible to you. So starting in a place that feels like, okay, yeah, I can do this movement. I can like start to move in that way, and then kind of building from that. And I think everyone's yoga practice is going to look vastly different. And I will also say that like sometimes, just because we are able to do something, just because it feels accessible to us, it doesn't mean that we have to go there. It doesn't mean that we have to like stretch to the, like kind of furthest point necessarily. And so the question that I always come back to when I work with people is like, okay, like, is that helpful for you? Like, do you feel like it's supportive for your body today? And practice might also look different today, tomorrow, 3 months from now, 3 years from now.
Well, I would imagine it does look different.
Yeah,
within every month. It looks different, right? Yeah.
Yeah. And so I guess the way that I offer this practice, and of course it might be a little bit different from what you might find at a studio, is to, really check in with yourself. Okay, like what does my body feel like today? What type of movement do I feel like I want to do? and what type of movement do I feel that I need it. And so, some days like we just want to rest more. And so more gentle movement, more like restorative style practices might be what you need. Even if you could do a more active practice, it's not necessarily what your body needs. And then other days you might feel like, okay, like maybe I want to challenge myself like physically and mentally a little bit more today than I usually do. And so allowing like your practice to change with you. I think that's one of the things that I really appreciate about yoga, is that like I think we can all like find something that is helpful within that practice. Whatever age, whatever phase of life we're in, whatever we're moving through at the moment. There's, so many things that we can do and that can feel helpful. So yeah, I would say just allowing your practice to support you, and no matter what that looks like, and maybe it looks different from the person next to you, and that's okay.
I think that the more women individualize and individuate their life and their care, the better their health will be. And absolutely. I think that what you're saying is really true. So I know that you shared with me that you're starting a membership in September, which is extremely reasonably priced, ladies. It's $9 a month. Basically that's a cup of coffee out, and nobody should be going out for a cup of coffee anyway. So I put Anne-Laure's website on the chat here, and I'm going to send out an email, an announcement to support her, because you can do this at home. You don't have to get dressed. You can be in your pajamas. Nobody has to see you. And doing these positions with her for a few minutes. How long are your classes, Anne-Laure?
So the way that I will be offering this will depend. So there's going to be different practices that vary from like a few minutes to like 30 minutes probably. There's going to be like a live component to it as well. But a lot of it will be recorded and accessible like whenever you need it.
Great.
So
that's even better. That makes it even more doable for women. On demand is the way to go. So I will send out an email announcement to you all and post when Anne-Laure starts her September program. And I think that, especially with her area of expertise of trauma and emotional wellness, that this is a really good match for my community and for all of you out there. So I wanted to bring her in and share her expertise with you. And so everyone, so Anne-Laure, do you want to say anything else? Any like other important items you'd like to share with the community?
Yeah, so I can share a little bit more about like how I approach, I think, like anxiety and trauma recovery.
Go right ahead. Wonderful. Absolutely. Yoga. Yes.
I don't know how much time we have, but
we have, 15 more minutes if you'd like. Go right ahead. Yes.
Yeah, sure. So I think like what I've come to after working with a lot of people over the years in terms of like the different aspects that I think are helpful in terms of like reconnecting to our bodies to move through anxiety and trauma recovery. I think part of it is to learn to cultivate self-awareness, start to be more aware of what's going on within your own body, within your own emotions, mind, to start to befriend your body maybe in a different way, or cultivate a different relationship with your body. Another aspect is to learn specific tools for self-regulation. I think a lot of us can feel very dysregulated, and what I mean by that is either like feeling overwhelmed, feeling anxious, or it might be the opposite of that, maybe like more like feeling more shut down, or moving towards more like depressed kind of feelings. And so when we are operating from that place, it can be really challenging to, make decisions or have like clarity, or maybe know like what would feel supportive for us. And so that aspect of self-regulation, I think, is very supportive and very helpful. And I think a lot of it, is through our body, through our breath, that we can really do that. Another aspect of it is kind of what I was talking about at the beginning of like reclaiming like the choices that are available to us. So like I said, one aspect of trauma is to have that power and choice taken away from us. And so as we start to do those practices, we can start to realize like where we have choice, how we can maybe choose to move differently or rest differently, or again like relate to our body in a different way, and that being able to like choose maybe some of those like small things throughout our days. And I think one last aspect that I want to share that I think is very important when we start to approach this work is to move into curiosity rather than judgment for ourselves.
Wow.
I think a lot of us.
Just a second. That's really an important distinction. Moving from judgment to curiosity is an amazing concept.
Yeah.
And that takes a brain switch.
Yes, it does. Yeah. And I think, we can practice that in maybe smaller ways when it feels maybe challenging to, move away from like what a lot of us call the negative self-talk into more positive things. And sometimes that can feel hard to move from one to the other. And I feel like curiosity brings maybe a little bit more like playfulness or neutrality into that, where we can get curious about, oh, I feel this way today. Okay, not necessarily like attaching meaning to it or judgment to it, but more like observing and being curious about things.
I think so often that when women don't feel well, there is, oh, I don't feel well. And the next thing is a mind voice, a negative mind voice that says, I did this wrong. I'm still sick. I'm going to be sick. Why am I not well? Or I'm doing everything right. Why don't I still have any energy? I mean, there's this whole mind thing that comes into play when you're feeling off center. That is difficult.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. And so, starting to introduce that, maybe it is in a very small way of like that voice of curiosity. Can start to like shift things. But I think I'm a big supporter of like finding the small ways in which you can integrate those things into your life rather than trying to change everything and like reinvent everything. It's like, okay, how can I start to move towards this one step at a time? Because I feel like for a lot of us it can feel very overwhelming to try to change a lot of things at once, and like you said, especially when we feel unwell or sick, like it can feel almost impossible to imagine ourselves feeling different. And so starting to do that in smaller ways can feel more accessible and more achievable.
Thank you so much, Anne-Laure. That's just wonderful information. And ladies, I really encourage you to when I send out the email announcement and the announcement in the group, to sign up for Anne-Laure's yoga class. It's going to be really wonderful. And you can always leave a comment below and we'll get back to you. And you can reach Anne-Laure at her website, yogawithannelaure.com. That's in the chat. Thank you so much, everyone. It's Carol Laurie signing off for now. Have a lovely day, and there'll be more later. Thank you so much for being here, Anne-Laure.
Thank you for having me.